And welcome into the Upside Sports Network. My name is Michael. Appreciate you guys joining us late on a Monday evening. A little bit of a change of pace anyway for our normal schedule. Yes, this is still our MLB Hot Stove Daily show, but we are also going to talk a lot of other sports as well. Lots popping off right now in both the NBA and the NHL. We'll get into some of those topics that usually we discuss in our Sports Talk show on Tuesday, but so many things are happening that we have to get into some of those topics tonight. So for those of you who are here to join us for the first time, be sure to hit that like and subscribe, and follow us on X at Upside Ascend, and on Facebook, Upside Sports Network as well. We'll get into some of the trade talk that's happening. A lot of injuries around Major League Baseball right now, I guess, is the biggest news item. Some guys coming back off of injury relatively soon. Sounds like Max Scherzer is coming off the 60-day IL on Wednesday to take the start. Sounds like Nathan Eovaldi is going to be right behind him for the Texas Rangers. We'll dig into a couple of those teams that seem to be on the edge of whether or not they should be or shouldn't be buyers and sellers, and we'll kind of break down some options if they decide to do so. But be sure to hit that like and subscribe, and let's get into it. Alrighty, so we'll start anyway with those of you who are kind of familiar with our show here, our MLB Hot Stove Daily portion. We'll talk a little bit about the MLB trade deadline first. It's still about a month and a half away anyway, but we're getting lots of information about the players that may or may not be available. Now, the teams that might ultimately decide to sell could change drastically in the next month. The All-Star break is kind of the barometer right now that I'm kind of using to kind of see where these teams ultimately fall. Teams like the Texas Rangers, the Boston Red Sox, among others, that could go either way. The Arizona Diamondbacks are another team that's going to have plenty to sell. So we'll start with the guy right above me, and that's Adolis Garcia. The Texas Rangers, in my mind, are just far too inconsistent on the offensive side, even with the progression of some of their players trying to get out of the doldrums of the first half of the year. While their offense is waking up and should be getting reinforcements soon, you'd think in Jock Peterson, even though he got off to a terrible start, this is not a good offense right now. And Adolis Garcia is one of the guys who's actually had some struggles this season. However, he's been great the last 3-4 weeks or so, ever since he had that quote-unquote mental break. Now he's going to be a free agent here around the age 34, 35 season. So how much are you really going to be willing to pay for a guy who kind of came up a little bit late here? Are you really willing to give him max dollars in free agency? That's why I think he's a great candidate for a trade for the Texas Rangers. Absolutely, would this be heart-wrenching for a lot of fans out there? Sure. But I think we all knew the writing on the wall, coming into the year, was that this team was very much built around the offense and a couple of big-time starting pitchers. Bullpen was going to be a work in progress. In the what ultimately happened, though, the offense really cratered on itself. The pitching staff has been absolutely dynamic. DeGrom looks back to being his old normal self. Eovaldi looks good. Molly came back and was great. Corbin, out of nowhere, has come in and given you great innings. They have enough pieces to sell here at the deadline, but if you're trying to push for a wild card spot, or better yet, win the division, while the American League is certainly wide open, and you could make an argument, I think it'd be a very strong argument to Bochy and Chris Young, the two decision makers down there in Texas. But for my money, I would rather move on from Adolis Garcia, Jonah Heim, other big ticket items that I could bring in more proven production at their spots, including Josh Young as well. But I would start with Adolis Garcia. He lives for the big moment. I think he'd probably fetch the biggest return out of any of the pieces they might trade on the offensive side of things. Now, of course, they could turn around and trade Molly. I posted a couple of trade ideas on baseballtradevalues.com if you want to check out our page over there. We posted one that sent Molly in exchange for a couple of minor leaguers to the Giants after they traded away a couple of depth pieces out of their rotation and bullpen mix. Molly would be a great innings-eating guy for the Giants in a division where they are trying to compete to win the division this year. I did not think this was going to be the year for the Giants. I thought they would kind of linger around the wild card, ultimately miss it by a game or two. Ultimately, it sounds like Buster Posey saw some weakness in the market, took advantage of it, and acquired the best hitter that will move at the deadline by bringing in Rafael Devers. Now, they did so by taking on all that money and giving up some of their depth in that pitching staff. Bringing in Molly would help solidify that pitching staff. Trading Adolis Garcia for Texas would allow them to kind of recoup some nice prospects from a couple of different teams with the trade of Molly and of Adolis Garcia. Then you go down to that next tier of players. You're talking about players like Jonah Heim, who could be a nice fit for a team that needs a catcher who they still think has a little bit of upside left in the tank. You're talking about guys in the middle relief area. Talking about Hobie Milner, players like that could get you a nice piece or two. Talking about guys like Patrick Corbin, but the guys that we are not talking about are going to be like guys like Evan Carter, Wyatt Langford, Corey Seager, Marcus Simeon, Nathan Eovaldi, Jacob deGrom. Those guys are going to be there for the long term there in Texas, and they're going to have some money to spend if they decide to sell at this year's deadline to really solidify their holes. Other teams that are looking to make some additions at the deadline could turn to the Atlanta Braves and Chris Sale. Now, Anthopoulos has already come out and said, no, we're not trading him. I just don't think that's really going to happen. I do think that if a team does bowl over the Atlanta Braves, I think they would seriously consider it. But as of right now, I think they'd be loath to trade him for right now. Another name is Emmanuel Clase. I think he's having a great resurgent year, and they have so many closer-type arms out there with the Guardians. I think this could be a Josh Hader situation where everybody was expecting it the last couple of years, but out of nowhere, now's the time they finally capitalize on his big market. So there's no big-time, number one, closer options available out there right now, and I think he would be the best one on the market by a mile. Yes, there's Kenley Jansen. Yes, there's guys like Ryan Helsley, but Emmanuel Clase has been the best closer in the sport the last couple of years here. And I think he's going to command a hefty package. I think the Guardians would be wise to capitalize on that while they have so many bullpen arms to kind of take over his spot when he does get moved. Welcome in, Trent. Appreciate you joining us once again. Crazy that the Lakers got Zion Williamson. Lakers will miss Austin Reeves. Let's see here. I did not. Let me see here. Notifications. Let me pull this page up. Jrue Holiday drew interest from Kings and Mavs. Yes. Let's scroll this thing all the way down. I don't know. I didn't see that one. Yeah, I didn't see that one. You had me going there for a minute there, Trent. But as far as trades to watch anyway, Gafford is one of them that we'll get into here shortly. But the Lakers, they are looking for a center. And the one thing, if you're a Lakers fan right now, this signing of Daniel Gafford, 3 years, $54 million, would be one thing I would say does not preclude them from getting this deal done. Because they only gave him a 120% raise, he is still eligible to be traded. That's kind of the magic of that contract. They could go ahead and hold on to him right now. They don't have to trade him right now down there in Dallas. But for the Lakers, they're looking for a rim-running center. He's already worked well with Luka Doncic in the past. And I think that's kind of a natural fit. Now, would the Mavericks do a trade with the Lakers once again after how that Luka trade ultimately was panned by everybody? It remains to be seen. There might have to be another team that gets in the works there. But Trent, you had me going there anyway. I did not see that one at all. And I'll put it this way. If you do see the source on it, let me know. But the one trade that we did get right before we came on the air anyway was the trade that sent Anthony Simons and 2 second-round picks to the Boston Celtics in return for Jrue Holiday. Jrue Holiday getting returned to Portland just a couple of years after getting dealt there before the Celtics went on their title run. But Jrue Holiday, great point guard, but obviously on the backside of his career, started to show some real limitations as far as his age last year. Hence the reason why they decided to go ahead and move him. Anthony Simons, much cheaper cap hit for the for the Boston Celtics, and gives them some very similar offensive production, maybe a little bit more juice back there. Defense is going to be a little bit of a question mark, but with Tatum going down due to injury, they need somebody to help provide a little bit of scoring here, and I think Simmons does give them that. For the Portland Trailblazers, a little bit mystified by this trade here. Yes, I understand the trade away for Anthony Simons. I thought they had a little bit of a glut of point guards back there, and maybe they could use a veteran in the mix here. But to go for a Jrue Holiday type of addition, I think they're trying to shepherd some of their young guys here. Maybe get Scoot Henderson to perform a little bit better. Maybe bring in an older buck in there to allow him to kind of settle down there. But for me, I just don't understand the trade itself. I would have rather had Simons and rather than have Jrue Holiday. In fact, I'd rather have traded Simons to another destination and brought in some wing help. But for me, Jrue Holiday does not really fit the timeline for the Portland Trailblazers. You already have Chauncey Billups as the head coach there. I'm not really sure what the impact is going to be here for Holiday, other than for Henderson, other than just bringing in another guard that Billups might trust a little bit more than the group that he has right now. But in either event, they have plenty of bigs. To me, they just needed more wings, productive wings, and Simons gives them some nice scoring. I'm not sure Holiday gives them exactly what they're looking for, and they're having to give up draft capital to do so. I mean, Simons is a good player. He doesn't necessarily have a great positive value as far as the contract, but when you look at Jrue Holiday, that contract is completely underwater, and yet Boston was able to get away with 2 second-round picks out of Portland for the deal. Hats off to Boston for once again fleecing a team. Absolutely stunned the way they're able to win trade after trade after trade after trade, and yet they continue to do so. The trade that we got yesterday, Kevin Durant goes to the Houston Rockets in exchange for Jalen Green, Dylan Brooks, the number 10 pick, and 5 second-round picks. Initial reactions were that this was a great trade for Houston, and I'll give them that. Houston does have a scorer that they can go to, that ISO scorer that can give them a bucket late in games, and that's where they really struggled. So good on them for doing that. Now the cost of it, Jalen Green to me is not exactly a 1 on a championship team. He might be a 2A, 2B for me. A guy that could be the second best player on a championship team, maybe third best player on a championship team, but he's not exactly a scrub. Now, the contract was signed for him to be traded by the Houston Rockets, and this is kind of the trade that they were hoping to bring in. However, I'm just not a huge fan of this for Houston. I'm one of the few critics of this deal for Houston because I just don't understand the timeline here or the thought process. Sure, it doesn't cost you a whole lot of assets, but the reason why you make the deal and got the deal done with Jalen Green was to be able to bring in significant salary in another deal. Now you traded away that asset. In order to bring in another big chip, you're going to probably have to trade away Fred VanVleet. Not a big thing, but what team is looking to bring on that player? And he fits so well on the floor with the team right now. His synergy with the coach and front office there is second to none. And I just think that team is in lockstep with him at the point guard because he kind of knows what they're trying to do on the floor. Şengün becomes the big question mark there. Is he the next piece to go out the window? For a guy like, say, Giannis or Anthony Davis or any one of the other big-name guys who might become available via trade. That's the reason why I don't like this deal for Houston, is because they gave away an asset that could have been used to bring in a better, more long-term solution. Now, Kevin Durant for this year, maybe next year, will still give you what you're looking for. Offense, solid-ish defense, but he's 37-ish years old, 38 years old, and so he's not going to last much longer here. Now, I hear all the pundits out there saying, well, he's got the shot that could just, ageless, motion. He can play until he's 50. That's not going to happen. Just look at LeBron James, one of the most durable players in NBA history. He's 40 years old right now, and he's starting to show the signs of wear and tear. Kevin Durant, to me, looks like a player that wants to be a number 2 on a team, not a number 1. That's why I think he preferred the destination of Phoenix, because he had Devin Booker to rely on. That's why he had Brooklyn with Kyrie Irving and James Harden. Ultimately, things didn't work out in either destination, but I just think, Kevin Durant, in that one postseason series years ago, it still sticks in my mind. He was in Brooklyn, and Kyrie was out, and James Harden was out, and he was the one guy left there, and they were absolutely going to lose that series against Boston. But there was a conversation at the time as who was more valuable, Jaylen Brown or Kevin Durant. Now, Kevin Durant subsequently was traded for that huge package from Phoenix that included Mikal Bridges, Cameron Johnson, all those first-round picks and swaps, and yet they turned around and traded Bridges and got 5 more picks. That's a massive haul for one player. You look back at what Jaylen Brown has been and has become. Would you argue that Jaylen Brown is a better asset right now in the NBA than Kevin Durant? Absolutely. Far younger, showing like he's going to really elevate his game, and I really don't understand that one for me. I mean, I would have rather had Jaylen Brown in that playoff series that I mentioned, by the way. Jaylen Brown completely locked up Kevin Durant in that series. Kevin Durant couldn't get out of that phone booth, and it was all because of Jaylen Brown. Now, the offense, of course, was still coming for Jaylen Brown. Turnovers were a thing. He's kind of policed that a little bit. But for me, I mean, Jaylen Brown just has so much more value, and I didn't understand the reason why Phoenix made the trade. And now here we are, it's 2025, and we're still having Kevin Durant being tossed around as a number one option on a playoff team. While I think he could get you to the playoffs, I don't think he's going to be your solution once you get there. Now, of course, they have all their powder dry, aside from the assets that they traded away in this deal in the contract of Brooks and Green, and of course the number 10 pick. But they still have all those picks from Phoenix that they can still trade, the 27 first, the 29 first. They still have the contract of Şengün and Van Vliet, but I just don't understand the acquisition cost here. I mean, Kevin Durant, you could have gotten another isolation type of scorer for a lot cheaper. I'm not saying Norman Powell is, Kevin Durant, obviously, but if you're looking for somebody who can get you a bucket when the rest of your team really struggled in that regard, you don't necessarily have to trade away the assets you did in order to bring him in. And I think Kevin Durant will start to slow down quite a bit here. I just don't understand the thought process here for Houston other than we need to jumpstart this thing and get on the roll here. Maybe he's going to mentor some of the young guys. You hope some of his skills rub off on a Jabari Parker, but he might be out the door for the next big piece that you try to acquire. So, everything costs in the NBA when you're talking about trades. We talked a little bit about Daniel Gafford just a minute ago. 3 years, $54 million was the extension. Dallas is going to try to trade one of their 2 centers, Lively or Gafford, this summer. I think if they don't get the offer that they're looking for, they're comfortable going into the season with both of those guys. I think their preference would be to have a healthy Derek Lively going into the year and stay healthy throughout the year, and then be able to trade away Daniel Gafford for another guard in this offseason to kind of give them some breathing room until Kyrie gets back, and then hopefully they can be a good 6-man off the bench once Kyrie is back in the lineup. As far as Daniel Gafford goes, been a great Dallas Maverick since he's come over, and I think he'd be a great starting center in the NBA. I think he'd be kind of in that 10 to 15 range of best centers in the NBA. I think Derek Lively, when healthy, is better, but the question has always been health. If he isn't able to stay healthy, then the contract that they just signed him to, Daniel Gafford, that is going to be worth every single penny. I would say the Suns did win that trade because they did get a couple of assets that are tradable. I do think there is massive overlap in the skill sets between Devin Booker and Jalen Green. I do think they'll try to peddle Jalen Green to another team that needs some scoring. I think there's a match there for, say, Atlanta. I think there's a match there for, say, Washington. I think there's a match there for, say, Charlotte. And then Phoenix can go ahead and try to get another top 10 pick out of Jalen Green if they can. We'll see if they're able to get that much out of him. I doubt they get that high, but they might have to attach other assets to be able to get the deal done. San Antonio reportedly has put a huge asking price on that number 2 pick. Unlikely that pick will be moved at this point. Unless it's for, say, like a Giannis or an Anthony Davis. I think San Antonio is pretty much set with what they're going to go with at number 2. Ethan, welcome in. Suns won that trade. Gafford or PJ Washington to Bulls for pick 12 and Lonzo Ball. I would say P.J. Washington is more likely to stay at this point, and I think Gafford has more value now after the extension got done, and I think Chicago is actually a legitimate destination for him to go to. The number 12 pick and Lonzo might be a little rich to some, but now with that extension done, I think it might be a little bit too light. You might have to throw in a second-round pick because Lonzo does have that significant injury issue history, and I think you might have to get a couple more assets in there if I'm the Mavericks to try to get that deal done. Now, PJ Washington, I think if you're able to get that extension done, that's not going to be a deal that's going to be traded within the next 6 months. That money is going to come in higher than probably the $23 million mark, and I think he's going to be unable to be traded until that point. Trey Murphy is one player I would trade him for right now in a heartbeat. I think he gives them the production offensively that they would need without Kyrie, but the only way they're able to do that is if they don't extend PJ Washington before the end of this, or before we get to the start, before we get to July 1. Bold prediction: San Antonio gets Jaylen Brown. Well, the Celtics did just trade away Jrue Holiday for a couple of second-round picks and Anthony Simons. Do they really want to go that far down? I question that. I think the more likely option here is KP. Ethan, like you mentioned in your first message there, KP for Zion. That's not going to happen, but I could see another team scooping up on a piece like a KP, hoping, wishing upon a star, hoping he stays healthy, and kind of does the unicorn things that we've all known him for in the past. I think that would be their preference to try to get out from underneath that contract. He is also a contract that is underwater, and we just saw what they did with Jrue Holiday's contract, which is also perceived as underwater. But I think Porzingis, with the injury history, the missed games, the health issues as well, I think he's more likely to have assets attached to him to get his contract off the books. To your point, though, about the bold prediction, San Antonio getting Jaylen Brown, that's the level of player I think they would move the number 2 pick for, but I think that's more of a trade deadline or next offseason type of move. This year, I don't think it's going to happen unless they can't move a Kristaps Porzingis, and they're desperate to try to trim off some more money here, but I just don't think they're that desperate as well. Chris Paul will sign with the Mavs. There are some rumors about that right now. Early in the offseason, or earlier, in the playoff run here, there was some talk about him, going to Dallas, until Kyrie gets back. Then, of course, there is speculation that he wants to play closer to home. Was a foregone conclusion that he would play with either the Clippers or the Lakers. And now we're starting to get more reports that he's seriously considering the Dallas Mavericks. So remember, you can't really talk to any of these players until we get to free agency. But there's always some back channel negotiations. I'm sure there's been some discussions between people who know people within Chris Paul's camp to people who know people within the Dallas Mavericks camp that have relayed what his role would look like in the salary and all those kinds of things if he chose to go to Dallas, and I think there's a legitimate chance it could happen. All right, there's one other thing I wanted to get into, and that's Giannis Antetokounmpo. He's had his name on the trade, quote-unquote, market for the last couple of years. Will he, won't he go? Will he, won't he request a trade? And I just don't think it's going to happen this offseason. I don't think it's going to happen anytime in the next several months. I think we're looking at the earliest, the trade deadline of next season, and I'm just not confident that that'll happen at that point either. I think he's going to wait until Damian Lillard is healthy again and then make his decision about how he looks in the offseason. Next offseason, July 1, we could see him request a trade, but I don't think we're going to see it for a full year. Tyson Chandler and Kidd close with Paul. They played together. They were contemporaries of each other. There is that connection, which is another reason why the Dallas Mavericks were adamant about keeping Jason Kidd and not allowing him to talk with the New York Knicks about their job opening. By the way, they did lose their top assistant coach, Sweeney, to the San Antonio Spurs to be their associate head coach. There is discussions about Jared Dudley leaving and Shammgod leaving as well. They did bring in Jay Triano. The Mavericks are going to be shaking up their coaching staff, but Kidd will be sticking around. And this is the reason why you'd keep Jason Kidd, is he does get you in the room with free agents that you otherwise would not be able to. I think that's part of the reason why the trade of Luka Doncic to bring in Anthony Davis was made, was because Nico Harrison, of course, pictured himself as an LA guy, wanted to get into the boys club out there and say, hey, I got the best talent, et cetera, et cetera. Even though he might not be healthy all the time, I got this XYZ talented player. I think he wanted to get in that old boys club out there in LA. But by the way, you gave up an even better asset, better player in Luka Doncic. I think that's where his mistake happened, really, and not really judging the fallout of that deal and what it would do to his franchise and all those kinds of things. And I would say outside of Luka Doncic trade, he's done a really nice job. But I think his ego got the better of him wanting to be accepted by his contemporaries out there in LA. Remember, he's an LA guy, wants to be out there, shoe company deal, the Nike executive, etc., connections with all those top athletes, Kobe, etc. He wanted to enter that club and be one of the guys instead of just the guy who works for the guy. And I think that's part of the reason why the deal ultimately got made. But other than that, he's been a very good GM for Dallas. The trade for Gafford, great. The trade for P.J. Washington really has worked out. Both seen as big risks at the time. Both have turned up spades. Same thing for Kyrie Irving. All of that has really worked out really well. And now he gets a great contract extension for Daniel Gafford. He's done a really nice job. The Najee Marshall get was really nice as well. Handling of Derek Lively and the injury on the injury front, I think could be done a little bit better. I think the exit of Casey Smith is another another mistake on his part. But other than that, things have worked pretty well down there in Dallas for Nico Harrison, aside from Luka and Casey Smith. R.J. Barrett is on the block. Well, the Raptors were in the market for Kevin Durant. We'll see what they ultimately decide to do. Sounds like the Raptors are getting a little itchy to get into the postseason once again and make some noise, much like the Kawhi Leonard deal did years and years and years ago for them. But we'll see if they decide to go that route. All right, one other thing I wanted to get into was kind of the NHL free agency that's coming up here. Draft is in a few days as well, so we're starting to see a lot of teams make some interesting moves. Trevor Zegras today was moved from the Anaheim Ducks to the Philadelphia Flyers in exchange for a second-round pick, number 45. Overall, a fourth-rounder next year as well, in addition to Ryan Poehling. You might remember him from the World Juniors for the USA with that game-winning goal for them when he was, I believe, 17 years old. He was a great, seen as a great asset at the time for the Montreal Canadiens. Has since bounced around to the Philadelphia Flyers and now to the Anaheim Ducks. I think the Ducks got a nice haul here for Zegras, who's been injured each of the last 2 years, but a 60-point guy when healthy his first 2 years in the league. Philadelphia's got something to work with there. But I wanted to touch primarily on Jason Robertson and the talk around some of the trade discussions around the Dallas Stars. I got a lot of Dallas area fans anyway in my chat, so I wanted to kind of focus on a little bit of the NHL for you guys, because Jason Robertson's name has been out there this offseason ever since the season ended. Marchment getting traded away, the signing of Duchesne. They're going to need to do something creative financially to be able to get the deals done that they're looking to do. They're looking for a top 4 right shot defenseman. I think the only way they're able to do that is if they bring back a Cody Ceci, who would be playing a little bit out of position or a little bit above his pay grade, or going for a trade of, say, a Rasmus Anderson. So something to kind of keep an eye on. They did make the trade for Mikko Rantanen, trading away one of their top assets in Logan Stankoven, as well as 2 first-round picks. Nil loves his first-round picks, and I saw a couple of different trades that have been floated out there. Not sure how accurate these are, but one of them sent him to Detroit in exchange for 3 NHLers, a first-rounder, number 13 overall, and a second-rounder the following year. I just don't think that's overly likely. I think that's a little bit too much of a package. But his name is one that's going to be on the trade market until July 1. If they don't get a deal done, say, by August, I think there's a really good chance that we see him traded before the start of the season if they're strapped for some cash to improve this ball club. Ethan, P.J. Washington, and Jaden Hardy for Colin Sexton. I don't understand why Utah would do that trade. I mean, Washington's a year away from free agency. Hardy's a negative asset in my eyes, or at least a net zero asset at best. Sexton is seen as a positive asset there for Utah. Gives the Dallas Mavericks some good guard play, and I think he'd be a good, 6th man off the bench once Kyrie gets healthy. But where's the upside here for Utah? Washington is the superior player to me. You're offloading the contract to Jaden Hardy, so plenty of reasons why to do it for Dallas. But for me, I just don't think he really fits the timeline for the Utah Jazz. I think Utah would be looking for younger, more controllable assets, or say P.J. Washington did agree to a contract extension, much in the way of Daniel Gafford. I think then that conversation would open up here. But as it stands, I don't think that deal is overly likely. Now, the deals that we could see here in the next couple of days with the draft right around the corner. Dallas is looking for another first-round pick, something to kind of keep an eye on. The extension of Daniel Gafford, I think this makes him the most likely guy to trade. I think Atlanta, I think New Orleans, I think Chicago, I think Phoenix, I think LA, as far as the most likely teams to try to acquire a Daniel Gafford. I would not rule out some three-team trade scenarios where, say, Gafford goes to, say, Los Angeles, and the Mavericks acquire, say, a point guard and a pick from another ball club. I think that's a very likely scenario. I think Dallas is going to be looking to offload a couple of different contracts this offseason. Martin, I think, is one. Hardy is another one. Omax is another one. Gafford or Washington could be one of those next casualties, because I think Dallas is looking to bring in a couple of guys on very cheap contracts here and make a little bit of a splash in the draft as well. So we'll see where they decide to go. Dallas is one of the most active teams in trade talks right now. I'm curious to see where they go with the Daniel Gafford trade or a PJ Washington trade, but those seem like the most likely option. One thing that will not be traded is the number 1 pick. That will be taken by the Dallas Mavericks and used on Cooper Flagg. He will be their starting small forward next year. I think the only way he doesn't start at the small forward is if they decide to bump AD in the starting lineup to the 5 and play him at the 4 and Washington at the 3. I think if they wanted to go with a big lineup, which has been floated a couple of different times by Jason Kidd, they could put Flagg at the 2. They could put Washington at the 3, Davis at the 4, Lively at the 5, and go with a Najee Marshall, say, as the point guard, and allow both of the Flagg and Marshall to kind of do that point forward thing down there in Dallas. Caleb Martin is gone 100%. Yes, I think that contract was acquired to allow him to be traded for another asset. At the time, the Mavericks traded away the better, cheaper player in Quentin Grimes anyway, and a second-round pick in exchange for Caleb Martin. Obviously, Philadelphia won that trade, but Dallas was not going to be able to re-sign Quentin Grimes. And while I think that the Mavericks were smart to try to get something in return for him, I think they could have done much better as far as the return. Why are you including another pick here if you're Dallas in that deal? They should have been the team acquiring picks, not the Philadelphia 76ers. As far as Martin goes, I would be looking for a wing. I floated the idea of Trey Murphy. The DLS Mavs guys were floating that idea as well. Bobby Karalla basically floated a trade idea of Gafford, Washington, Martin, Hardy, 2 first-round picks in exchange for Alvarado and Trey Murphy. Alvarado, of course, would fill the hole for Kyrie Irving until he got back and healthy. Loosely, I will say. He's very undersized as a starting point guard, and if you're counting on him for a full season, your season's not going to go well. But Trey Murphy, I think, would be a great asset to the Dallas Mavericks. I think he has star written all over him in the right market. Really personable guy, really intelligent young man. If you see any of his work on the Old Man and the 3 podcast, or if you're looking at some of the work he did last year with Brian Windhorst when he was injured on the NBA Today show, just really, really smart young man, a great three-point shooter, solid, if not plus defender as well. Sky's the limit for him, and he's got a little bit of a handle over the last couple of years, really elevated that level of his game. If I'm Dallas, I try to move heaven and earth to bring him in, allow him to be the starting 3 instead of PJ Washington, who, while I think is a good player, he is not Trey Murphy. Murphy is a much better offensive player, a very comparable defensive player, and I think is just a far better price point as well. Washington's going to cost you anywhere between $23 and $28 million. Meanwhile, Murphy is only at $30. That's a bargain for the player that you're going to get in return for him. I think Martin, as you mentioned there, Ethan, would be absolutely salary filler. But appreciate you guys joining us tonight. Wanted do a little bit of a round, kind of go around the horn anyway on the topics around MLB, NBA, and the NHL. We'll do a little bit of the NFL. We saw the Fanatics Fest anyway with Micah Parsons and Kevin Durant. Kevin Durant was notified a little bit before he went on stage that he was getting traded to Houston, so he kind of knew when the news broke when he was on stage, and everybody thought, oh no, he found out while he was on stage. No, he knew a little bit before that it was coming down the pike here. But Micah Parsons still hasn't signed his long-term contract with the Dallas Cowboys. I still think it's going to get done. The question is what the number is going to be. George Pickens needs a new deal after this season as well. Offensive line looks rehabilitated, but there are big question marks out there at left tackle. Has Tyler Guyton learned from his time with Tyron Smith this offseason, spending some time training with him, hand placement, hand fighting? Or is he going to be a bit of a blight over there at the left tackle spot? If he is, they flex out Tyler Smith. There's all kinds of changes that would have to be made if Guyton can't hold down that position. Hopefully, year 1 to year 2, he's learned a lot and performs at least as a solid left tackle. We're not looking for a superstar, but solid left tackle. Cowboys would love to see that. But Micah Parsons is where the story is at for the Dallas Cowboys right now. I don't see this getting into the Trey Hendrickson debacle that we've seen out there with the Cincinnati Bengals, but it is something that should be worth noting as if we get closer to, say, opening, or if we get closer to kickoff anyway, and he still isn't signed to a deal, say he misses a game or two this season, then I think we can revisit the idea of maybe a team would be out there trying to trade for him, a team that's trying to win a Super Bowl, and then see how many first-round picks and other assets they're willing to give to Dallas to be able to bring him in. But I think we're way too early for that to happen. I think he will ultimately get a deal. I think it's just a matter of them playing chicken with each other right now. But he was on stage anyway with Kevin Durant at Fanatics Fest, and Kevin Durant, after finding out he was trading to Houston or getting traded to Houston before he went on stage, fielded a bunch of questions anyway about how he was looking forward to going to Houston, all those kinds of things. And Kevin Durant, he always likes to say he loves to talk ball. And to a certain extent, I think he is correct. He loves to talk basketball, will engage fans with talking basketball all day long. But he's allowed to be human as well. And sometimes that human side can get himself into a little bit of trouble with social media, burner accounts, those kinds of things. And, while he's allowed to be human, I think he needs to tone or rein in that defensiveness that he gets from the outside influences that really have no impact on whether or not he plays well or whether or not he gets a certain contract or how well, where he stacks up as far as legacy. I think he just needs to kind of, close a little bit more of that out of his mind and just grow from it. But he was on stage at Fanatics Fest, and what a photo those two make. Kevin Durant a little bit taller. You realize Micah Parsons isn't exactly the tallest guy in the world, especially standing next to Kevin Durant. But just look at what he does on Sundays, and just kind of seeing the two standing side by side was just something to see. The difference in the two builds. But I appreciate you guys joining us this evening. We'll be back live tomorrow night, so be sure to join us. We'll do another Upside Sports Talk, probably in a similar vein to what we did this evening. Probably get a little bit more in-depth and probably make some trades and make some signings for pretty much all three of the major sports out there. So if you have any ideas that you'd love to send us, we'd love to hear them. We'd love to go over them with you guys. So feel free to send them in our chat. When we do go off the air, we do try to catch up with some of those comments with you guys. With our channel getting up and going once again, we're going to try to stay as active as we can for you guys. But we'll have a couple of videos coming out tomorrow. One will be the Kevin Durant news and kind of how, my take on it is the Houston Rockets anyway kind of did a little bit of a miss on this one. Not necessarily because of the age of Kevin Durant. It's kind of the combination of the assets that they gave up that were tradable contracts more than anything else to be able to bring in other premium talent. You're going to have to give up one of Şengün or Van Vliet. Nobody's going to take Van Vliet anyway, which means Şengün is going out of town. Jabari Parker is somewhat expendable now that Kevin Durant is in-house, and I'd rather have Jabari Parker in the long run than the future of Kevin Durant, which, by the way, is only one season. We'll see if they get the extension done, but something to kind of keep an eye on there as well. But tomorrow we'll get into a lot of that discussion. We'll touch a lot more on the NHL free agency coming up. A lot of trade talk right now around the NHL. So appreciate you guys joining us. Hit that like, subscribe, follow us on X at Upside Ascend, and on Facebook at Upside Sports Network as well. And we'll see you guys again tomorrow night.